morning, everybody. We are starting week 4 here, Financial Foundations. And it's going to get us right into discussion about businesses and how businesses are organized. Most people have some understanding about business structures, maybe because of the type of organization that you work for. Maybe you've started a business and there are some defining features among the different types of businesses that can have an effect on you as a business owner. So we're going to look at different ways to organize yourself as a business. Anybody know what one of those ways is, what one of those organization types is?
S Corp.
S corporation, yeah, that's a good one.
Corporation, LLC.
LLC, you know what LLC stands for? You know what those letters mean?
No.
Okay, that's all right. Very good though that you know that part of it. It stands for Limited Liability Company or Limited Liability Corporation. That middle word there is really, really important. If you're thinking about starting a business, you must concern yourself with liability. So any others, Ruth?
I know Inc. too. Incorporation, I think so.
Corporation, yes. You mentioned S corporation. That's kind of a variation of, in fact, LLC, S corp, and regular corporation. Those are all kind of related, very similar, and they also have an advantage for the owners. And when I mention liability, that is the big advantage. That's why people start corporations. That's why you incorporate as a business. So as we talk about the different types of structures, liability is going to be a big focus. So hopefully everybody can see this handout from the class materials in Google Classroom. Types of business. Business organization under business and competition. Three main types of business. Right there in that first line: sole proprietorship, partnership, and corporation. Sole proprietorship has only one owner. It could be a large company, but typically a sole proprietorship might be, say, maybe it's an artist, a photographer, or somebody like that. They don't have any employees. They don't need a big office. They don't have, warehouse space and all that sort of stuff. They are basically responsible for themselves. So for a sole proprietor, somebody that owns a sole proprietorship, what do you think the liability situation is? First, well, maybe I need to back up. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about with liability? Okay.
Yes.
Some do, some don't. Liability. The state of being responsible for something, especially by law. So there's an example right there underneath that. The partners accept unlimited liability for any risk they undertake. Okay, liability, you are responsible. So for that sole proprietorship, if I'm the photographer that owns that sole proprietorship and I do something that injures you when I'm out doing a photo shoot, I'm entirely liable. Now, I'm going to have liability insurance, so hopefully that will step in and help me cover that. But I don't get to share that. I mean, liability is one of the risks of owning a business. Because if you damage someone's property, if you hurt someone, if you do something that's illegal, for instance, they're going to come after you. Somebody's going to probably sue you, or you might have a criminal case against you. So you're liable. If you're a sole proprietor, you got nobody else to fall back on. So the second of the three in the list there is partnership. 2 or more owners. Okay, we're going to expand our business. As a photographer, I need somebody that can do graphic design. So we're going to team up and we're going to expand what the services that we can offer. But it doesn't have to just end with two partners. You can have a lot more partners than just 2. Anybody want to take a guess at what the liability situation is in a partnership?
It's 50-50, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you only have one partner, it's 50-50. If you have 7 other partners and everybody's shares that liability equal to 1/8, right? It's you just take the liability, whatever it is, and you divide it up amongst all the partners. Now, again, if you're a good business owner, even in a partnership, you're going to want to have some liability insurance to help protect you from stuff like that. Anybody can file a lawsuit these days. So having that insurance there as the first defense is a prudent business move. There are lots of different ways to structure partnerships also. You can have a general partnership, you can be the general partner, you can have limited partners. And all of that can be defined in legal documents that establish the partnership. Limited partners, a lot of times, they're just putting money in. They don't have anything to say about how the business operates or what it does. So if you're an investor, you might invest, you might buy a limited partnership in some organization that does something that you think can make you some money. And so your return on your investment is probably going to be based on how much you paid and how many other limited partners they are. So if the owners or the employees of that partnership do something and get sued, you as a limited partner, you're not going to have to worry about it. So already just with these 2 examples, you can see sole proprietorship, very basic, very simple, one person typically. You might not even have any legal documents that go along with that. You go into a partnership, now it's getting a little bit more complex. You need to have some legal representation and come up with the description of what everybody's roles are in the partnership. Yeah.
About like putting money down on those businesses and stuff. Oh, like if you own part of the business, you have savings.
If you own part of the business, Sure you do, but it depends on what type of structure your business has. If it's a sole proprietorship, you're making all the decisions. If it's some kind of a partnership, then usually the roles are going to be defined. You know, maybe one partner is really good at marketing, maybe another partner is really good at accounting, maybe another partner has a different role. You know, going out and finding business or managing projects or whatever. So how much say you have in a partnership is going to be defined partly by how many partners you have and how you define everybody's roles. Limited partners are not going to have much say at all in what goes on with the company because they're just there pumping money into it. They're investing, hoping to get some return on the investment, get paid back at some point later on. It's a good question, Brianna. Corporation. That's the third type of structure. Many owners. And corporation is the only type of business that can sell stock in its company. Think back to the little cartoon video of the guy with the oil drum manufacturing company. You know, he might have started as a sole proprietorship, and as he got bigger, he got more orders. He needed to get more sophisticated. They decided to sell stock, and then ultimately ended up on the New York Stock Exchange. What do you think the liability situation is for all the people that own a corporation? I'm going to give you an example to think about. So we've started off with the proprietor, sole proprietor's got all the responsibility, all the liability. Then you go to a partnership and now you're splitting that responsibility and you're splitting the liability amongst several partners potentially. Corporation though, I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago, anybody buy coffee at McDonald's?
Not much.
Okay, next time you do, look on the cup. It says, caution, contents are hot. What a shock that is to have hot coffee. You buy it. Well, why does the cup have to be labeled to tell you that it's hot?
So if you burn yourself, you don't get sued.
Exactly, because they got sued. Somebody claimed they got scalded after they drove away from the drive-through line and spilled coffee on themselves in their car, and they sued McDonald's. But think about all the people that own McDonald's stock. Did any of those people have to pony up any money for that lawsuit? No. There's basically zero liability for the stockholders. The stockholders are the actual owners of the corporation. But having a corporate structure is what they call a shield, protection against liability. Because McDonald's, they had a cadre of lawyers that they defended the company, they defended the corporation. I'm sure they had an insurance company there involved that paid the person that got burned something to settle the lawsuit. And then part of the settlement obviously was to go back and label their coffee cups. Any sort of product that you can imagine, if you read the fine print, there's something on there that talks about liability, not responsible for blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm an auto racing photographer when I'm not here at school. It's one of my passions. And so every time I go to the racetrack, I have to sign a liability release. I can't, if I get hit in the head with a tire, I can't sue anybody because I'm acknowledging that it's dangerous at the racetrack. Well, of course it is. I accept those risks. But you buying coffee in McDonald's drive-thru, you don't expect to get burned. You know, it's a different situation for liability. So that's one of the biggest reasons why people create corporations. Aside from being able to sell stock and get potentially a lot of money invested in the company, liability for individual liability is a big factor. Because think about a corporation structure. They've got a board of directors, they got a president, vice president, they got all these other people. Let's say the president of McDonald's has made a mistake. He's done something that trickles down to the operations. Well, McDonald's as a corporation, and he personally might get sued, but as an officer of the corporation is going to protect him as an individual. And unless he's done something illegal, then the police will come after him. But from a civil liability standpoint, it's really the best structure for company owners to get into. If you go down a couple of under this bullet point number 2 here, liability is the state of being legally responsible for something. So if you look at the bottom of that page, there's some, this is one of these sheets that could be like a notes page. You could fill in advantages and disadvantages of each type of business. What would say be the advantage of having a sole proprietorship? Can you think of any advantage? Do you have to ask anybody else for permission to go do something? Nope. It's all you. You can make all the decisions, good or bad. The disadvantage is the liability aspect. Now, when you get into a partnership, what could an advantage be of a partnership?
They split the decision of work.
Split up the work?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and Brianna just mentioned that the liability is also split. It's not all on you. The other thing that I thought of, and I kind of touched on this a little bit, was you can add more skills to your company by bringing partners in that can do different things than you can do. And some of this is kind of a natural progression. People have an idea, they start off as a sole proprietor, then they get bigger and they need some more help. Maybe get into a partnership agreement, ultimately into perhaps a corporation. Now, there is a heck of a lot that's done in real estate development through partnership arrangements. That's a whole nother subject into itself. So I think we've already talked about the advantages and disadvantages a bit of corporations. The big advantage being shield from liability. Okay, questions, anybody?
No.
All right. I want to show this crash course video. It's kind of long. I don't think we'll watch the whole thing. But I think we watched one of these crash course videos when we were talking about monetary policy and fiscal policy. It's the guy with the little streamers.
When will your idea transform from a casual side hustle into a full-blown business? Is it when your podcast gets sponsorships, when your catering company is booked for 5 weekends straight, or when you sold your 100th bottle of Club Dijon? Basically, when do things get real? I can't tell you when you'll start to feel like a business person, but the world recognizes it when you legally register your formal business structure. It could be an LLC, or a C Corp, or a B Corp, or a co-op. So many different letters. It can be daunting. move from the abstract idea stage to the realm of bank accounts, taxes, liability. Sometimes it can feel like you're making arbitrary decisions, but we're going to wade through the legal streets together. Things are about to get legit. I'm Anna Akana, and this is Crash Course Business Entrepreneurship. The legal basics of entrepreneurship aren't as flashy as generating ideas or staking out the competition, but think about them like a choose-your-own-adventure novel. Choosing a business structure opens up a different future with unique twists and turns. So buckle up. Legally, you have to register your business. And depending on where you live, your government might have certain requirements in order to do that. In the US, you register to say a cordial, "What's that?" to the state and federal government. They need to know you exist, so you can get the licenses and permits you need to do business. And everyone's favorite topic, pay your taxes. For you as the owner and anyone you're doing business with, registering can create some legal and financial protection. Specifically, we're talking about liability, or the state of being legally responsible for something and potentially using helpful tax structures. We'll talk about a bit of money stuff here, but check with your government's commerce, tax, or treasury departments for more details. There are lots of different options to pick from when you register your business. So it is time to choose a path. These are most of the US options, but a lot of countries have similar structures. Let's jump in. A sole proprietorship is a type of business that's owned and run by one person. Think freelance writers, independent landscapers, or even YouTubers. This is the easiest choose your own adventure decision. Choosing nothing. If you provide a service or product to someone by himself and get paid without registering for any kind of business, you're considered a sole proprietorship, but it has some drawbacks. You aren't considered separate from your business. You are personally liable. That means your business money isn't separate from your personal assets, like your name, car, or house, and your personal assets can be taken in a lawsuit. Okay. Raising investment money can be tough because you can't sell stock or shares of ownership in the company. And banks might hesitate to lend money because they perceive a bigger risk in lending to just one person. Filing taxes as a sole proprietor is pretty easy. You have what's called pass-through status, where profits are passed straight to business owners and are just part of personal taxes instead of also being included in the business taxes. Basically, since the business money isn't separate from your personal money, you just submit once with a 2x form. Also, you have to factor in self-employment taxes, which are explained on irs.gov. The cool thing about a sole proprietorship is that your business expenses can be tax write-offs. New computer for work? Write it off. New desk? Write it off. You want to check with an accountant, of course, but that is a real advantage of owning your own business. A partnership is a way for two or more people to share ownership of a business, which is great if you don't want to go it alone, or for professional groups like attorneys or dentists. If you choose a partnership, you have to pick one of three flavors that mostly affect power and liability: general, limited, and limited liability. In a general partnership, you and one or more partners share personal liability and all have an equal say when making decisions. Just like a sole proprietorship is the easiest choice for partners, but personal liability can be risky. In a limited partnership, someone takes on unlimited liability, so their personal assets can be seized in a legal battle, and they have to pay self-employment taxes. But they are the head honcho and own and run most of the business. The other partners have limited input, but also limited liability. They're only responsible for a slice of the business assets, so they are personally protected from lawsuits. These are often silent business partners, or basically just in a limited liability partnership, or LLP, everyone gets limited liability. It's more work to form than a general partnership and gives less protection than fancier business structures. But it does give owners at least some liability protection. No matter the flavor, you'll have an easier time raising money in a partnership than alone, since banks might be more willing to lend to multiple people. And you can get investment if you're willing to take on silent partners. Partnerships are also helpful for tax reasons. General partners have pass-through status for taxes, like a sole proprietorship. Everyone splits the profits to the business and deals with their own taxes, including self-employment taxes. Overall, partnerships, especially LPs and LLPs, are more expensive than sole proprietorships because they need more legal and accounting help. Now, a corporation, sometimes called a C Corp, is an entity that's separate from its owners. Like a person, a corporation can have profits, taxes, and liabilities. The BBC, eBay, and Airbnb are all corporations. Where you incorporate matters for many legal reasons. In the US, for example, lots of people form their legal entity in Delaware. If you choose the C Corp path, you're protected from lawsuits. You aren't personally liable and have limited liability. Funding is also easier because corporations can sell stock to the public. While corporations can borrow from banks, they typically find it too restrictive and find money other ways. Plus, as stockholders, the people who own shares of your business, leave or sell their stock, you can keep chugging along instead of stopping to restructure. But for all these benefits, you have to be ready to hustle. Any type of corporation needs a giant pile of state and federal paperwork to form. They require extensive record keeping, operational processes, and annual reports on their activities to the government. C Corps are also expensive to form. And unlike sole proprietorships and partnerships, C Corps pay tax on profits before handing money out to stockholders, who also have to pay their own taxes, which means a little less profit for each owner. C Corps are also beholden to profit. Their decisions have to be based on what makes the most profit for the stockholders. A benefit corporation, sometimes known as a C Corp, focuses on social good. Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, Tom, and the Honest Company follow this path. Like any corporation, C Corps give you lots of protection with limited liability. And maybe more importantly, this structure empowers and protects you to make a difference and a profit. C Corps are designed to let the CEO, the person in charge of the business who may or may not be an owner, make decisions for social good. Even if those decisions are a little less profitable, the CEO will not get in trouble with the stockholders. The funding and structure is similar to a C Corp, but you can also look for impact investing. People investing money to create a specific social or environmental benefit. It's still really expensive to incorporate, and C Corps are taxed the same as C Corps. Plus, to make sure you're doing social good, you have to create even more reports for transparency. So get ready for mountains of paperwork. A limited liability company, or LLC, is a sort of corporation partnership hybrid. LLCs can have one or more owners. Complexly, the people who produce this video are an LLC. It's literally in the name. You have a limited liability. Plus, you can still choose to become a corporation later if you want. That path is still open. Many startups begin with an LLC because of the protection and flexibility it has. In fact, this might help you attract investors. LLC stock is privately owned, so being able to transform into a corporation and eventually sell stock to the public might draw financiers. And like a partnership, you have pass-through status for taxes, which could be nice, but you still pay self-employment taxes. Everyone's got to pay the tax now. One risk of choosing this path is when an owner joins or leaves an LLC. You might be forced to reform, but you can also create a legal agreement within an LLC to cover ownership transfer. A cooperative or co-op is a business owned by the people using it, like REI or a farming co-op. An elected board of directors runs the co-op, while every stockholder/owner can vote on the overall direction. So stockholders have a real voice. The main problem is that the wheels of democracy turn slowly. Stockholders vote on all decisions, which means that responses to market changes are slower. But in the spirit of equality, each owner gets precisely one vote and enjoys limited liability. You can generate money for a co-op by selling stocks, and any profits are distributed among the stockholders. But you might have a hard time getting outside investment. Traditional banks aren't super excited about lending to businesses where their money won't be guaranteed by one or a few specific owners. And like a corporation, co-ops have the double taxation treatment for stockholders. And finally, at long last, is a nonprofit corporation, which is created to do charity, education, religious, literary, or scientific work that isn't taxed. Nonprofits include Amnesty International, Better Business Bureau, or the Foundation to Decrease World Stuff. You choose this path, your work benefits the public. So nonprofits have tons of paperwork and record keeping, operational processes, and must submit an annual report on their activities to the government, similar to a C Corp. Also, owners are very well protected and have limited liability. After jumping through some hoops with the IRS, the government will grant you tax-exempt status, meaning you don't pay state or federal taxes on any profit. And there are strict rules on what you can do with the profits you earn. Like you can't just distribute them to stockholders or political campaigns. As for funding, funding, nonprofits are often eligible for grants or money given by a government or organization for a specific project. Other people in corporations can also just give you money so that they can write it off on their taxes and out of the business of their funds. Got all that? We made a handy chart for you too, just in case. By choosing our business structure, we're also thinking about who we want to work with and what future we see for our business. Let's go to the thought bubble. You do a lot of tutoring online using free video chat software, but you notice a gap in the market and want to develop a long-distance tutoring business and potentially a new app. You decide against a business partner because you don't want to share decision-making or profits with anyone. And you couldn't find a co-founder with skills that complement yours. But you can't handle all this tutoring yourself, so you plan to hire employees. You dig into the legal requirements for how to pay them, and find some software to help you manage payroll, taxes, and more. It's starting to look like a real business, so it's time to choose your own adventure. You might start out as a sole proprietorship, just you and one employee, and you're not sure this is a super long-term endeavor. After a couple of years, though, you decide to become an LLC. You're great at what you do, but some clients get mean when their grades don't skyrocket. So you need protection from personal liability. And then you're at a crossroads. The future looks promising for generating a tutoring app, but you're having trouble getting investors. So you can stick with an LLC or try to transform into a C Corp. Maybe you decide to stay in LLC, but you get an unlucky dice roll when generating your app. You spread yourself too thin, and eventually you can't support all your tutors and developers. You eventually decide to cut your losses and call it quits. You had a good run. Or maybe you decide to put in a lot of work and incorporate, and luckily hit the jackpot. As your app grows, venture capitalists are clamoring to invest. You're quickly becoming the premier tutoring organization in the US, and this business might outlive you. Thanks, Thought Bubble. There really is no best structure because every business is different. Your path might change over time, and success involves grit, determination, and luck. We recommend talking to a trustworthy attorney or tax accountant for specific and nuanced advice, since they'll know your business idea in and out. Once we've chosen a legal structure, we still have to say, what's up, the government, so they know that we exist. And this means paperwork. Let's start with the feds. In the US, you need an employer identification number from the federal government, which will help you with taxes and getting a bank account. If you open a branch of your business in the Scottish Highlands or the Bolivian Salt Flats, you'll need to look at what those countries require. Next, register your business through the Secretary of State's website. There are often small filing fees, and if that's a barrier, try to find an advocate at a local small business development center, bank, or your state's Department of Commerce. Someone may know someone who knows a program to get your fee waived. It never hurts to ask. The worst that they can say is, no, go away. Then check in with your local government. Are there requirements to doing business in your city, like a business license that you need to get? And finally, it's never too early to start thinking about taxes. Review the requirements for your state and federal tax reporting. You can use an accountant or DIY software like TurboTax, depending on your needs. But make a plan. Stick to the plan. File your taxes. So the bottom line is, registering your business is a big decision, but an exciting one, because you get to define your own path. Where do you see your business going in 5 years? What does success look like? What infrastructure will you need? It's all up to you. Next time, we'll talk about how to get feedback before launching your business and what to do if your idea falls flat. Thank you for watching Crash Course Business, sponsored by Google, and thank you to Thought Cafe for the graphics. You want to help keep Crash Course free for everybody?
Well, there was never really a good spot to pause that, but there was so much good information in her discussion. I just decided to go ahead and run with it. Anybody have any comments or any observations about that? There was a lot of information there. You know, one of the things that our elected officials you will hear this quite often when they're talking about the economy as a whole. You're going to hear about how important small businesses are to generating jobs. More jobs are created by small to medium-sized businesses every year than by the big corporations. So the opportunity to create your own future, to go on your path, like she's talking about in the video, is definitely there in America, and for that matter, in most countries of the world that are working on on the basis of a market economy. Obviously, legal structures can change depending on the country, but certainly the opportunity is there. If you have an idea and can get funding for it, you can potentially make lots of money doing it. Some people would even perhaps call that the American dream. Now, if I go back to this business organization and competition, there's a section in here called Sweet Opportunities. I'm going to skip that for today because there is an assignment that will come out about that. This is a description of several people in the candy business and thinking about how they should organize. So I'm going to go to next, though, is this ending section about competition. Who knew there were so many different types of competition, right? 4 types of competition. Perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly competition, and then monopoly. Monopoly is kind of a bad word in business circles. Government doesn't like monopolies either. Although there are some legal monopolies that the government helps to create. So I'm going to start with that one first. If a monopoly involves only one seller and there are no substitutes for the product being sold, it would be nearly impossible for a new seller to compete against a monopoly. Can you think of any examples of a government-supported monopoly? Well, a big chunk of my previous career before becoming a teacher was involved in managing water and sewer utilities. Do you get a choice at your home of who you buy water from, or who, when you flush your toilet, who provides the treatment? Nope. Sometimes those are provided by municipal entities like the city of Noblesville. Although here in Noblesville, Indiana American Water is the water utility. It's a for-profit company. Electric utilities a lot of times are the same way. There's only one choice. You want electricity, you get it from Duke Energy because they have the wires in place. And government supports that. Because can you imagine the mess? I mean, where do most utilities go? They're out along the roadsides. They're in the easements adjacent to public rights of way where roads and streets are. Can you imagine the mess if there were several different water utilities out there all trying to get into the same right of way? It's too expensive, and it would just create god-awful congestion and problems for not just the businesses, but for the consumers also. Monopolies, though, in general, are frowned upon. Why would a monopoly be a bad thing for consumers? Think about your supply and demand rules. Why would a monopoly be a bad thing for you and I as consumers? Let's say there was only one manufacturer of cell phones. So if I wanted a cell phone, there was only one company I could go buy it from. Am I gonna get a good deal? Probably not, says Brianna. That's exactly right. Monopolies are never, well, not never, but rarely good for consumers. In the business world, monopolies, the government breaks them up. AT&T is a result of there used to be one big phone company. Used to be you could only get phone service from Bell Telephone. Well, they broke all that big company up, and so that led basically to a telecom revolution, where now you got tons of choices for where you get your phone service. The utility industry, though, is different because of the cost involved in putting that infrastructure in, and it's also seen as a public good, something that's necessary for health and well-being in the community. So the government's still going to regulate those public monopolies. They're going to look at how much their fees are, what are they charging every month, are they reasonable? They're going to be regulated from that standpoint. Private sector monopolies, though, usually get lawsuits filed against them by the federal government, and they get broken up. There's been lawsuits involving Microsoft, involving Google, and other companies claiming that those companies are actually monopolizing a segment of the industry. And so if you're gonna get to that size, potentially your company could be subject to the same kind of lawsuits. If your goal as a business owner is to smash all your competition and run them all out of business, well, you might end up as a monopoly, and then the government will come looking for you also. I couldn't hear all that, Sarah. The government does what? Well, if we're talking about, did my utility examples, did those make sense? You know, sometimes the government is going to encourage a monopoly. You know, maybe they're going to allow a utility to go in a particular area and say, okay, this is your area to serve. Okay, so everybody in that area has to get services from that utility, but it gives the utility some assurance also that they can predict their costs. They're not going to have to deal with competition from some other utility that wants to come into that same area. The government supports that kind of thing. In the private sector side, though, the government does not want to have only one producer. You know, if the only grocery stores around were Kroger, and everybody had to shop at Kroger, you had no choice in it, they could charge whatever they want. I mean, their goal is to make profit, right? So that's what the government tries to step in and prevent from happening. Just somebody that controls so much of the market that they can charge whatever they want, because that's not good for consumers. Government's trying to look out for us in that situation. I'm not sure if that actually answers your question or not. You know, I have a hard time hearing sometimes, and maybe if you if you got questions like that, it might help me if you put them in the chat, type them in there, and then my hearing won't be an issue. Okay. And it's worse right now in this dark room because sometimes if I can see people talking, it's easier to understand also. So the flip side of the monopoly is that first example, perfect competition. Many sellers, the products they're selling are very similar, and it's easy for buyers and sellers to get into and out of the market. Think about, let's think about office supplies as an example, or school supplies. Or you think there's a lot of companies that make pencils? Yeah, heck yeah. You got a lot of competition. You can buy packs of 10 or 20 or 50 or whatever, or you can buy a single pencil, and you can get them from lots of different companies. They're all competing against price. And from the supply and demand stuff that when there's competition and there's lots of different choices, typically the price is going to go down, right? That's good for consumers. Monopolistic competition is kind of a mixture. You've got many sellers, although not as many as in perfect competition. The products they're selling are at least somewhat different, and it is more difficult to get into and out of the market. So can anybody think of an example that might fit under this category of monopolistic competition? What about cell phones? I'm not talking about Sprint or Verizon or T-Mobile or the companies that provide the service. I'm talking about the actual phones. Yeah. So you really only have two choices, right? When you get down to it, you can get an iPhone from Apple. There's nobody else that sells iPhones. So if you want an iPhone, you have to buy it from Apple. Now there's other, Best Buy, you can go buy an Apple phone. It's still an Apple phone, no, it's an iPhone. And Samsung is an Android phone. There's lots of different companies that make Android phones. I got a Google Pixel phone. You got Samsung, you got Sony. I don't know how many different phone companies there are that make Android phones. The reason for that is because in essence, Google is behind Android, and it's public code that they make available for any developer to go use. So you can get the code to make a cell phone and go modify it and come out with your own brand. So this might fall underneath the idea of monopolistic competition. You got lots of people selling phones. Products are a little bit different. But think about what it costs. If you want to come and become a cell phone manufacturer, you want to create a company to get into the market, are you going to be able to compete with Apple? Take the money it's going to require to get into the market, or Samsung, for instance, Nokia. I'm drawing a blank on other big cell phone companies. Magnavox. I think Magnavox. I don't know, but that's the whole idea behind monopolistic competition. Now it's getting harder and harder for somebody else to join the market. The oligopoly competition is the strangest one here on the list, I always thought. Products they're selling are very similar, and it's very difficult for a new seller to enter the market. There's one big organization centered in the Middle East that kind of qualifies as oligopoly. If you've ever heard of an organization called OPEC, it's an oligopoly. They readily admit it. OPEC stands for oil producing and exporting countries. A lot of them are in the Middle East. They basically set the price for barrels of oil that they bring up from the ground and sell on the world market. How are you going to compete with that? Well, you got to go find some other oil. You can't just go into their country and drill some oil wells and start drilling for oil on their land or on somebody else's land. Extremely expensive. Very few sellers. Of course, the products in this case, barrels of oil, crude oil. Very difficult for a new seller to enter the market. So if you ever have to write about this, that's the company, that's the organization that you want to look up, OPEC. Should have put oil there. So, and that, you know, what's resulted from that have been some of the richest countries in the world are in the Middle East. Dubai, United Arab Emirates, UAE. It just happens that that part of the world has incredibly rich oil reserves. The last page of this handout. Sorry about that. Last page of this handout talks about tablets. Now we're getting into some serious competition here. And there's information on here that's graphed that we can kind of latch on to. That big blue area is controlled by Apple. At least when this chart was done, 66% of the market they control with iPads. Samsung Galaxy at this point was only 5%. Kindle Fire was 14%. The BN Nook, the Barnes & Noble Nook, 5%. Other companies, 11%. Well, those other companies aren't really selling exactly the same thing as what Apple is selling either. Kindle Fire is more of a reader for electronic books, and so is the Barnes & Noble Nook. They're trying to get you to read books. Now they've had to add things. Samsung Galaxy, though, Samsung, they're more like the type of notepad personal tablet that Apple's selling. Now you've got other people that are in the business recently too, probably under other companies. Think about it, Microsoft Surface, that's a tablet, touch screen. So this information is a few years old now, and I'm sure these percentages have all changed. So if you look at this second question here, what percentage of the market does Apple not control? Well, that's easy to figure out. 100% minus 66%, 34%. So they are the dominant player in the tablet market, according to these statistics. 34% they do not control. What do you think Apple would do? Question number 3. If its biggest competitor, the Kindle Fire, increased its market share to 20%. So if the Kindle Fire went from 14% market share to 20%, how do you think Apple would respond? Would they just shrug their shoulders and say, "Ah, Kindle's selling more tablets"? And what do you think Apple would do in order to sell more, Brianna? Make theirs better? Okay. What else can Apple do besides making them better? Low price, yeah, low price is a common way they can have sales. How about if you go buy an iPad, we're going to give you an iPhone. Yeah, buy one, get one. None of those other companies can do that. They don't have phones. Well, Samsung's got phones. They might be able to. But Apple, because of the type of products they have the ability to do things like that, to bundle this stuff and do some special incentives to reclaim that market share. You know, they're probably not going to be happy going from 60%. See, they would lose 6% in theory. They go from 66% market share to only 60. Well, if you think about the dollars that are involved and how much income that actually represents to Apple, it's probably in the billions with a B. So it's not something to sneeze at. They wouldn't just shrug and move on. They would attack it somehow. They would try to, you know, offer some incentives, give you a deal on your cell phone service, maybe give you a phone, especially if you've got an Android phone. Turn in your Android phone, we'll give you an iPhone if you buy one of these tablets. All right, the last page we're going to look at here, this next page has a couple of charts here for Netflix. Everybody's got Netflix, right? Well, these two charts here, the stock price in dollars is the first one, and it's over basically 11 months of 2011. February, March, April, May, all the way through December. And the stock price is kind of wobbling along here. It gets up close to $300 per share, and then it starts to drop. So by the end of the year, the stock price is less than 100, maybe even closer to like $60 a share. Would you buy Netflix stock at that price? Probably. It was at 300. If you can get it at 60, you're going to think, oh, well, hey, maybe it's going to go back up to 300 and I can sell at that point. Remember, buy low, sell high. And if you compare this chart below it, the volume in millions of shares being sold. That's exactly what's happening. Look here in October and November. Stock price is going down. The biggest spike in the volume of sales was right here at this low spot, right at the end of October. So a lot of people suddenly bought shares. Well, what was going on at that point in time? Netflix recently increased its monthly membership fee in September, which outraged many of its customers. So maybe those customers decided to sell their stock or to get out of Netflix. I kind of doubt it. So maybe that was a strategic move by Netflix to get the stock price lowered so more people would buy the stock, because that's where the company gets dollars invested. Think about all the made for Netflix TV shows and movies that are out there right now. Netflix is been rolling in money, and they're basically able to create their own programming now with some big time stars. I mean, they're paying really good money for people to make these productions. Because if you look at the volume down here, the rest of this time, it never went over 20 million shares. And then suddenly, boom, 30 million, 50 million. That is, even if you just think of the raw dollars involved. If the share price was $90 a share at the end of October and they sold 42 million shares, that's a lot of money. And that's kind of what companies do. That's what they look at. They look at the market share. They figure out how the stock's doing and how they can generate more value for their stockholders. Question or comment on any of that?
No.
The other handout that goes with this is just under competition. It gives a lot more detail on the 4 types of competition: pure competition, perfect competition is another word for it, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. So you want to read that along with the other handout. Those two go together. And then, like I said, there will be an assignment coming out that goes with those stories about the candy makers. What you're going to be recommending, what type of business structure they should pursue after you read their stories. So that's all I got for today, gang. So appreciate you guys being here. If you got any questions, again, send me a text, all right? All right, thanks for being here
Thank
in
you.
the
Have a
class
good
and
day.
online.
See you
Thanks for-
Thursday.
All right, thank you.